This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona. And today we're delighted to have with us Janice Hallett. She's going to be talking about the brand new book, The Killer Question. And this is the US edition. While you're both talking, I'll run down. We did just get some signed British ones. So I'll go down and grab one and hold it up later.
Actually, Janice could hold it up, and she should, because look how different it is.
The red, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
look at that. I mean,
No.
that is a completely different cover treatment. I love it that the pub is what's on the British edition and the beer is is what's on the US edition, which may
I
be,
I love the skull that's on the shadow, the skull shadow on the US edition.
yes, underneath where
Yeah.
and the pencil says a novel, which I think is, I mean, they're both really very clever designs. So, but I like the fact that different sensibilities, you could think, okay, they're both English language editions. Why don't they look the same? And sometimes the covers do, but sometimes there's really a completely different kind of concept, between the two countries.
Yeah, both completely different and yet both perfect.
Yeah,
It's like they
exactly.
both represent different parts of the book. Wonderful.
So Janice, of course, a master of tact, would never say she likes one better than another. But I've had tea with Janice in London, so I know that off screen she has a more forceful personality. But there we
Oh,
go.
we did, didn't we? That was that feels like a long time ago. It's probably last year, wasn't it,
It
Barbara?
was June, a
Capital
year ago.
Crime.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
a year
Capital
ago,
Crime.
June. You had to sit
Yeah.
there patiently and wait for me while the car threaded its way from Heathrow.
It was worth the wait, though. We had a lovely cup of tea, didn't we?
You did. It was great. It was indeed. All right. So, Patrick, thank you. Patrick said good afternoon, but for those of you who might be watching abroad, it's actually 9 o'clock in the evening in the UK and 10 o'clock in Europe. So, we're
Yeah, so as my usual spiel is that I'll put up a link for copies, autographed, and these unsigned American copies. And if you have questions for Janice, go ahead and type them in, and Barbara will bring me on screen, and I'd be happy to ask any of your questions. So, into the darkness I go.
right. Go and enjoy your birthday cake, assuming you have any. Right. So, anyway, here we are, and we're going to talk about the pub quiz. But I would like to say first that I we are all big fans of Martha Grimes. And for those of you who've read Martha Grimes, you know that all of her titles were taken from the names of pubs. So in the pub in this book, The Case is Altered would be a brilliant Martha Grimes title. I know. I mean, I kept wanting to put it on the cover and say The Case is Altered, but
We did think of it as a title at one point
did
when
you?
we were going through names. The Killer Question certainly unanimously won out, but we thought of the Sudden Death Round and the Cases Altered, but the Killer Question just seemed to encapsulate everything about the novel.
No, I think it's an excellent title, and you don't really want to be confused with Martha, who, at the age of 90 something, published a new book called The Red Queen this year.
Wow.
I know, really impressive, right?
Wow,
Another,
I hope I'm still writing at 97. My goodness.
oh, yeah, very impressive. Anyway, to really understand this, you do have to become familiar with the British pub quiz. So why don't you explain it to it, Janice, as like a social phenomenon?
It is. I mean, the pub quiz. I know in America they tend to call it bar trivia. But it's a
Maybe.
similar sort of thing. Um, Pubs hold often on their least busy nights, so maybe Monday to Wednesday, they'll hold a pub quiz to generate custom. And usually the landlord or maybe they'll get in a proper quiz master will read out questions, encourage people to make teams, and run a quiz for very low stakes prizes. It's mainly glory that you do your pub quiz for. Well, the pub quiz I do regularly with my team is at the Legion in Ruislip here in the UK, and we quiz every fortnight on a Monday. And I have to say that for something that I said before was low stakes, the stakes get higher the more you do it
Ah,
because you get the competitiveness kicks in. And not only competitiveness with the other teams, but for your own, within your own team and for yourself, you want to not come last. If you can't win, you want to be up there, and you want to improve your score every time. So there's a lot of passion involved in the pub quiz. And quizzes are very ardent, passionate, they can get quite angry if the quiz doesn't go right, if the question master isn't asking the right sort of questions, or if there's a team that might be cheating. That you'll know it. And I've seen quizzes fall apart, shall we say, when things weren't going correctly. So yeah,
Well,
there's a lot of passion.
I would say the closest thing we could come to would be Trivial Pursuit, which in its heyday, I mean, I can remember being on cruise ships where, sort of a floating pub, where Trivial Pursuit could really both bring people together and rile them up,
Oh,
as you
totally.
point
Yeah.
out. But, those questions were made up by the Trivial Pursuit people. And so what you wanted to do to win is that you wanted to have team members with a broad spectrum or specific, both a broad spectrum and then more specific knowledge. So maybe somebody was good at sports and somebody else was good at, I don't know, literature or geography or something. And on any given night, the team that somehow magically had the best conglomeration of expertise would win, but it
Oh,
might fail the next night.
that is absolutely it. It's diversity. And often in pub quizzes, I think it's diversity of age as well, because you've
Mhm.
got younger people who are in touch with their own cultural things, older people who remember stuff from the past, because all quizzes will feature questions from different times, whether it's sport or whether it's art and literature, TV, film. There'll be different time zones, if you like, and the different ages of people really makes a difference. But yeah, that is key to winning quizzes, is that mixture of expertise.
Well, you're absolutely right. But in the case of Trivial Pursuit, the questions were put together clearly by the people who are, mastering, manufacturing the game. Who puts together the quiz? I mean, where do the quiz questions come from in pub quizzes?
Well, they can come from prescribed quiz books, and in the Killer Question, there's a community of pubs owned by the same brewery but run by different landlords, and they all get together on a Monday over WhatsApp and let each other know which quiz they're doing that week, because most of them, except one, except our main pub, the Case is Altered, they all use prescribed pub quiz books. Now, if a team quizzes somewhere on one day of the week and they go to another pub to quiz on another day of the week, those pubs don't want to be using the same questions because that team will have an advantage. So that's
Absolutely.
why all the pubs will coordinate which quiz they use. But Mal, one of the main characters in The Killer Question, he sets the questions himself. He's a former quizzer, and so he prides himself on knowing how to set a good quiz question. And that's it's kind of when events transpire in the book, and we have a mystery team, the Shadow Knights, who turn up and score top marks every week. That really riles Mal, because as a good question master, you shouldn't ever have that. You shouldn't ever have a team scoring top marks, because your questions should be pitched to make sure that that doesn't happen, so that no team gets zero and no team gets full marks. So they really get his back up, and he determines to find out, well, if they're cheating, and if they are cheating, how they're cheating. And so that's the killer question.
Well, it is the killer question. And of course, it wouldn't be a mystery if there wasn't some chicanery, some cheating involved. So, you're a master of telling stories in different media and communication. I mean, we've talked about all your books as you've written them, and it's really been fun to go through, email, WhatsApp, the recording one with the phones, which I really liked.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
what did you decide in this one? What mix of communication channels did you decide to put into this book?
Well, this one has lots of texts and WhatsApps. It has quite a few emails, but it also has quiz rounds. It takes place over 10 weeks. In 2019, this particular quiz the quiz section of the story. There are 3 actual timelines in this book, which we'll probably come back to. But the quizzes take place over 10 weeks, and we get each week a list of the quiz teams and where they sat and who was a member of the team on that particular night. We get the quiz rounds, what they were, and then we get the winners, who won and who got what scores. So we can follow the progress, because as the teams get increasingly frustrated with the Shadow Knights winning every week, they start swapping teams around and people start poaching good players from other teams to try and increase their chances of beating them. So yeah, we get to record the shenanigans across all of those quizzes. So that's the main point of difference in this particular book compared to, say, The Examiner, my last book, where it had WhatsApps, it had emails, etc. But then you also had the exam papers and coursework in that particular book, because it was set within an MA university course. So this one has quizzes, and it was an awful lot of fun to write.
So did you make up the quizzes yourself?
Well, luckily I didn't have to do the questions. If we'd put the questions in, I think the book would have been twice as long. So
Ah,
that wouldn't have been quite so desirable. But yeah, I had to think up the rounds, the quiz rounds that Mal was doing. And of course, I had to think them up as him, because he has a particular background, he has particular interests. You know, he's a character with certain sort of pretensions and aspirations. So he might want to appear rather more erudite than he is. So yeah, I had to create these quiz rounds, bearing in mind that a character was actually creating them. So I couldn't be me creating them. And that was more fun, actually.
I can see that. So first you had to create the character, and then once you've got him firmly in mind, you go from there. Now, I don't know what the UK edition looks like, but in the US edition, at least in my copy of it, and I don't know because mine is an advanced reading copy, not the finished book, but there
Oh
is
yeah.
in fact a quiz from the publisher that, gives you a chance to kind of test your skill. For example, when is the case's alters trivial night held? By what article of clothing can the ringleader of the cheats be identified? Who are the other member pubs of Ye Old Goat Group, which I guess is I love that.
That's the brewery.
Right.
These
How
questions are, I think they're only in the ARC, the American ARC reader
maybe.
copy. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't
I
think they're in the
wondered. I
actual
mean,
book.
I'm
Yeah, I don't
always
think
at a
they are.
slight disadvantage, in that almost 100% of the time I have read the advanced reading copy, and the book can really differ. Do you remember when I'm trying to think, was it Colin Dexter? Who was it that concealed somebody's first name throughout the entire series of the books? I think it might have been Morse. I think it might have been his first
Oh,
name. But
oh wow.
anyway, when they sent out the advanced reading copies for whoever it was, let's say it was Morse, they deliberately didn't put in, because the point of the book was going to be the big reveal, right?
Of course, yeah.
Right. And in the advanced reading copy, they omitted it because, it would have led to widespread. And so, I remember saying something about, well, I thought there was going to be this big reveal. And then we still don't know his name. And there was like, no, 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 it's right here in the book. And I felt like such an idiot. So it isn't always perfect to read the publisher's advanced copy and then actually talk to the author and fail to capitalize on a couple of changes. So when Janice, I love this quote too, which I'm going to read from the publisher. When Janice floated the idea of this new book, she and her UK editor asked if a pub quiz night would translate to the US. My answer, this is from Caitlin Olson, the executive editor here. My answer was an enthusiastic yes. In my early 20s, I traveled to a nearby bar in New York City every Tuesday for their trivia night. See, trivia night right there, not quiz night, where I excelled in categories about literature and geography, but miserably failed at anything involving contemporary music. But I went for the camaraderie, the competition, and the chance to show off just a bit as a possibly recovering know-it-all. So, I mean, I can remember how, if not vicious, at least competitive Trivial Pursuit nights were. So I'm going to assume that it's kind of the same thing.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Caitlin, in her piece there, really hit the nail on the head. It's yes, it's showing off and quizzing and winning something potentially, but it's actually the social life that you go to. You have to talk with people. If you go to a quiz night and you find yourself on your own, you could join a team that doesn't have the required number of members, and you'll make new friends. Or if you go there with your friends every week, you can talk to them and work on something together, work towards something. And of course, in the quiz, your mobile phone has to be, out of your hands the whole time because, otherwise you could be cheating. So you've got this 2, 3 hours away from your screen. I think that's becoming increasingly valuable. And some characters in The Killer Question, one of their main reasons for staying at the quiz is because they've got this 2 or 3 hour slot per week where they don't have their phones. They can't have their phones. So they can interact with people face to face. And I mean, it's something I've become over the 2 or 3 years we've quizzed quite seriously. It's something I've come to value as well, that those few hours, because I find myself, a slave to my phone more and more with
Do
each
you?
passing day. Yeah, I'm really sort of addicted to it.
That's so interesting because I find
Mm.
myself less and less a slave to my
Really?
phone.
Oh, what's your
Yeah.
secret, Barbara?
Sorry?
Mm. What's your secret? Because I'm trying to give mine up.
Well, part of it is I have no personal social media at all.
Mm.
So since I don't have Facebook or any of those things, I do Instagram for the bookstore, which
Mhm.
is not, can't be terribly personal. But otherwise, I, it, I'd rather read or do something else. But let me go back to a phrase here in her paragraph, which recovering know-it-all. I think that, I mean, I have a tendency to do that. And sometimes I have to really squelch myself when hosting authors and, right. Nobody really wants to hear from me about the time that whatever it was happened. Although, to be fair, when you're filling an hour and you can't really do any plot reveals, so you only can actually talk about the book for like 10 minutes or something, sometimes it's helpful. But I
Mm.
do think that it is a channel for know-it-alls, to kind of
Mm.
come into their own in a society where there isn't necessarily a great call for people who,
Yeah.
are like that.
I don't know. I mean, and I don't know whether I like the phrase know it all because I think what we know or being perceived as being intelligent or being learned is quite important. No one really wants to be seen as stupid. And I think by
No,
proving that you know things can sometimes be a boost or it can help your own sense of your identity. And I think if you like me and you have a degree, I have a BA and an MA, I have two bits of paper that tell the world that I'm clever. I don't need to prove anything. But if you don't have that, if you never had the chance to get those qualifications, then how do you prove to yourself and to the world that you are worthwhile, that you know things, that you've learned things, that you have knowledge and that you're not stupid? Sometimes that can be scoring highly on a quiz or proving to people that, you do know about a topic or that you've got a specialist subject that is quite learned when no one would think that of you. I think it's kind of important what you know and what your pet subject is. It can say a lot about us, and I feel quite warm towards people who other people might consider them to be a know-it-all because I think I can learn from people who know things that I don't know.
I'm sure you're right. I think that the implicit in the idea of know-it-all is as somebody who hogs too much of the time, too much of the limelight, and squelches other people who might have something to contribute.
Mhm.
So I think of a know-it-all as somebody who tends to dominate, rather than, because I think you're absolutely right that each of us wants to be valued,
Mhm.
and people have various interesting interests or areas of command or expertise that. I mean, it's the fun of reading, reading so many books by so many different authors. One of the reasons I love crime fiction is I'm always learning something that, in the normal course of events would not come my way. I feel like I have an entire head full of, completely random knowledge some of which, but I love that, I
Yeah.
mean, I know how to defense a corpse, I know how to, never tied as a critical ingredient, that isn't necessarily going to be useful. And I also think in many of the contemporary thrillers, geography is a really important element. And I have found myself actually opening maps on my phone to see, is it really possible to walk from Russia into Norway? Came up not long ago with a Brad Thor book. And even though I have been to Lapland and all the rest of it, I'd kind of forgotten that Norway has this little alley that goes across the top of Sweden and Finland directly to Russia. So, in point of fact, you can
You
walk
could
from
walk
Russia
it.
right across the
Okay.
top of those other two countries and do your shopping in whatever it is, Norway, and go back again.
Wow. Well, I
Yeah,
didn't know that, so and now I do.
right. I
Okay.
mean, but I love maps. I really
Yeah.
love maps and geography. And in fact, the new Anne Cleeve's book, we spent some time with her when you and I were together in London. She's moved to the Orkney Islands. And I have to admit, I didn't know exactly where they were. So once again, get out the map. There is sort of one in the book, and work out not only where are the Orkneys in relation to mainland Scotland and the Shetlands, but then which Orkney Islands, because there's several of them, and the action moves around from one to another. So I think that for some people that might just be an irritant, but for me, it really kind of enhances reading the book to figure out that now I know where I really pressed. I could navigate the Orkneys,
Wow.
never have come up before I read, Anne's new book over here, The Killing Stones. So, uh, and if you travel, I think a lot of this kind of ragbag knowledge can become really extremely useful.
No, definitely. I think the transportation, isn't it? I think we read in order to be transported elsewhere. And I think when the writer transports you to somewhere completely different, a different country, a different culture, it can be so enriching, as well as whatever story they're telling you or whatever characters they've populated that world with. You are moved to a different place, and it is almost like traveling without going anywhere, like
It
looking
is
at a map.
traveling. Yeah, it's a version of Alibaba and the Magic Carpet for
Yeah.
sure. So what we have here are Sue and Mal Eastwood running an isolated rural pub called The Cases Altered. So how did you determine, the setting for your book?
Well, when I set off on that first draft, I knew I wanted a murder mystery set in the world of pub quizzing because I knew that world well. I knew it had relatively high stakes for the people who do it, and lots of passions running very high. So I thought, good arena for a murder mystery. And then I started just thinking really, and there are several pubs near where I live called The Case is Altered.
Really?
And yeah, it's a real pub name. And I always really liked it. I thought it was a very strange name. And I looked up where it could come from, which is all explained in the book. And I thought, wow, that's a great name for a pub. So I had the pub name. Then I thought of landlord names, Sue and Mal. And the next thing I thought of was the other pubs that they would all be in touch with because they all work for the same brewery. And from all of these characters came the mystery. And Sue and Mal in particular, who are central to the cases altered, central to the quiz, central to their little community around this isolated pub, they sort of grew on me, really. They didn't really tell me who they were. And so without any spoilers, I can't go into too much, who they were before they ran the pub. But they did have a past life, and that's why this book has essentially three timelines. It has the quiz, the main bulk of these quizzes with Sue and Mal, Cases Altered, 2019. It has 2014, 5 years earlier, because Sue and Mal had a past life. They were police officers in that past life, and they were involved in a secret police operation that went catastrophically wrong. 5 years later, they're running a pub. But 5 years after that, in pretty much the present day, their nephew is standing in The Case is Altered, and the pub is derelict, it's empty, and it's been closed for some time. And Dominic is desperately trying to get Netflix involved in making a true crime documentary about Sue and Mal and what happened at that quiz. Because at some point, while the Shadow Knights were confusing everybody with their performance, a body was pulled from the river, and it was the body of a well-known cheat who'd been going from pub to pub trying to win money in the quizzes. So that is what, threw a cat among the pigeons at that particular time. And 5 years later, Dominic wants Netflix involved. And that's all I can say.
Well, yeah,
But yeah.
no. I mean, yes, I did think the story. Well, but you've done that a lot in the course of your books. There's the present, the past,
Mm.
and I mean, the past does inform the present for sure. Um, I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of crime novels that maybe take off from the present into the slight future, but there's also a great wave of novels that build from what we would call a cold case. Something that happened in the past that now has surfaced in the present, or a crime in the present that can only be understood if you go back into the past. And um, I like both story structures. Um, but I like excavating the past, I guess, and sometimes I feel like I'm a failed archaeologist or anthropologist or something. But I do think it's fun to see a person's present, whatever the facade is that they have created, and then you can tunnel back under it. I get a little tired of books that are based on bad actors in high school, because let's face it, most people don't have much sense when they're teenagers and do stupid stuff, and sometimes the stupid stuff leads to a terrible result, but oftentimes it's just like embarrassing or whatever. um, I sort of prefer it when somebody with more personal responsibility goes wrong rather than some kid who gets drunk and takes the family car and runs over someone and hides the crime. um, it's just not that interesting. So, you really like going back into the past lives of your characters and digging into them in the Examiner, for example, or certainly in the Alperton Angels.
Yeah,
Um,
certainly. I think I like I'm really interested in psychology, the
yeah,
psychology of behavior, far more than I am interested in forensics, say,
right.
or things like that. Yeah, I like to know what events in someone's life lead them to create the crime that they do, or to just behave the way they do. So that's something that really, really interests me. And of course, yeah, you always have to go back, usually to childhood, to find those things. But yeah, I'm always riled by those teen shows or the teenage. When you're looking at a teenage character and then the person they grow into, usually the teenage bully has grown into a bully in adulthood too. And I think that's not necessarily the case. Um, I would rather have a more meandering look at how people develop from their childhood. But yeah, I hate characters who are all bad. Anyway, I always like to give bad characters a good quality and good characters a bad quality. It's just, I don't know,
I know
just to.
I did an event last night. Patrick and I did it together with an author who generally likes layered characters, but she took enormous pride in the fact that her villain is irredeemable. I mean, he's just totally bad from day
Oh.
one. And we really kind of enjoyed talking about that because
Oh,
really, in most cases, that's not all that interesting, an antagonist in the novel, but in this particular book, it actually worked, but I just loved watching her kind of go, yes, he was irredeemable. And I go, okay, gee.
oh, it sounds cathartic.
It was. Yeah, I know.
Definitely.
So,
I'd have given him a cat or a dog, I think. If you give him a cat or a dog that he can love, or he or she, then you've redeemed them, I think.
well, it's true that you can give them some sort of relationship. Actually, speaking of things that you've endowed with the past, my possible favorite was in the case of the Alperton Angels, when I knew damn well that the stage prop in question had a past that you were at some point going to reveal. It was an inanimate object, but it was so central to the story. And I thought, at some point, she's going to explain to us why this thing is so important in the book. Um, so you've also kind of been able to, I mean, you do have law enforcement people in your books, but you kind of you haven't had to bone up heavily on police procedural and procedure or the judicial system or whatever.
Not at all. No, I think the for this book maybe a little bit more. I mean, I've got a
Yeah,
friend who is a police officer, and she's married to another police officer, and that was very useful because I was writing about married police officers.
right.
But no, when it comes to things like blood spatter and ballistics and that kind of thing, I'm just less interested in it, so it's not something that tends to factor in my writing. But yes, I do like the kind of law enforcement and something I like about the police aspect of police characters when they're in a crime novel is that they sort of legitimately put aside their feelings in order to solve the crime, to solve the puzzle. And that's like the kind of standpoint that we have as the readers. So I quite like that the fact that the police characters in these books tend to be the characters that we're with and that we root for and that we're on the same emotional level as them. We've put aside our horror and we just want to focus on who did it and or who was done to what was done to who in the case of my books. But yeah, I don't see myself doing any big forensic crime anytime soon.
Well, it doesn't even have to be forensic. Sometimes it's just following procedure. The British police, to me, judging from crime shows, because I haven't actually been involved personally with the British police, tends to be pretty military in subject. I mean, in structure. There's always a chain of command. And I did Jeffrey Archer's book launch last week. And one of the things we talked about was in the course of a 40-year career, and he has been writing for a policeman called William Warwick, who starts out as like a bee constable and
Hmm.
ends up having managed to keep the 2012 Olympics on track as the, Metropolitan Police Commissioner. But one way he lets you know how William is doing is the mode of address that people use towards William, but also the mode of address that William uses towards both his people under his command and then his superiors. And in the very last two lines of the book, there's this wonderful flip-flop, just in the way that the two characters talk to each other, where you see that the command structure flipped just based on the fact that one of them goes from first name to title and the other goes from title to first name. Now, that's not really very American. We talked about that because, we're not nearly so formal. But I
Hmm.
think it also comes from, that kind of that military structure that the police follow.
Yeah, I think you're right. And well, don't they say that people who live in or work in a hierarchy, like people in the military, tend to be happier, or it generates more happiness because you know exactly where you are. You've got these formal titles, these formal rules that you'll follow, and you know where you are in that hierarchy. Whereas if you work or live somewhere where it's less hierarchical, you tend to be more insecure about where you are, where your position is. You feel you have to do things in order to keep that position up or to avoid um, causing offence elsewhere. So there's more in uncertainty and insecurity in not having a hierarchy. I don't know whether that's true because I've never been in a work or any sort of position where I was in a very strict hierarchy, but people do say that, so I don't know.
Well, I think it depends. A lot of it depends on your own personality. You will not be surprised to know that when I was part of the civil service as a librarian at the Library of Congress, I hated all the rules and recognized, to be fair, I did recognize that I would not thrive in
Mm.
that structured environment. And, I do much better when I'm in charge of structuring the environment. But I can also remember when Rob and I were in Odessa in 2011, when, before the Ukraine did and when Russia was much more open. Um, we were, for some reason, passing by a group of seniors or involved in a group of quite elderly Russians. And I was so stunned to hear two of the women say how much they miss Stalin. And I went, I mean, I was rooted in my tracks, and I sort of blinked, and they went on to say there was no uncertainty. They knew exactly, how life was structured and what was expected of them. And I thought, people who've been brought up in that kind of a structure, then they would be more comfortable in it because they really would never have practiced, or had the opportunity to find out how to structure your own life and make your own decisions. So I think it could go both ways. I think you're right that lots of people are more comfortable and happier, but I think there are also people who really shape against it. So you are not a person that I see as hierarchical. I mean, we've known each other for several years now, and you came to writing from the theater too, which I think, it really fosters a lot of creativity and imagining worlds and, that kind of thing. Even though you have to follow a dramatic structure if you're going to be a playwright, you have a lot of flexibility in how it goes. So do
Yes.
you think,
Sorry, carry on.
I was just going to ask you if you think that your training in the theater, your time in the theater, has led to the way you structure your books.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. Certainly in the terms of dialogue, I mean, when you write a play script, you're pretty much just writing the dialogue. You're writing even fewer stage directions than you are for a film script when you're writing for the theatre. So it really is all dialogue. So I've transferred. But yeah, theatre is I think one of the freest forms of writing you can do because there's so few constrictions. I mean, a stage can be anywhere. It can be the surface of the moon, the surface of Mars, the bottom of the ocean, any country in the world. It could be anything. And also here in London anyway, there's a sort of thriving fringe theatre community. So you could put your play on if you had free thinking ideas, whatever ideas you had, you could get some actors and put your play on. It's in a way you couldn't publish your own book. Well, you can now, but still you have to pay quite a bit of money for that. You couldn't make your own film. That would be very costly. But you could put a play on. So yeah, it's one of those very free. There's lots of experimentation. I think the more something costs to put on, or the harder something is to do, the less experimentation there'll be because there's more risk. But with small theatres, you don't have so much risk, and then you can be experimental. So that's where it is. I suppose online as well. I'm just thinking out loud. You could just film something experimental and put it online. But
Reason I asked you that question is that you write your books rather than in a narrative voice, in a descriptive voice, you largely write your books in dialogue. And you convey that through structuring things through email or the Twyford Code, which I have to admit, when you described it to me, really threw me, but but in the end, I liked it. So instead of narrative passages, what you have is you have various voices using different media to move it along. And I think that it would be difficult for somebody that didn't have your experience in theater to choose to write your books that way.
yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I think it helps if you're a listener, if you listen to the way people talk. And I've always been a listener my whole life. I've not really been a talker. It's only in the last few years when I've been really obliged to start talking about what I do in doing things like
Yep.
this and book events and all sorts of other talking things that I hadn't anticipated. But I have learned how to do it. But before then, I was a listener. I would, soak up what people said and how they talked to each other and what they said when they weren't telling the truth, or what they said when they were, what they said when they were angry, and how different they were talking when they weren't angry. That's something I've been soaking up my whole life. So that helps as well, both well for the stage, screen, and the page.
So before we started this discussion, while Patrick was getting us organized, I asked Janet if she'd been on tour for this book, which she said. But I love, and then I asked her if any of her tours had involved pubs. So I loved your reply. Tell us about it.
Yeah, actually, and I thought of something else as well. Yeah, we here in the UK, the book launched 2 or 3 weeks before the US, and the publishing team and I went to a London pub for a quiz night. I think it was a Monday night, and we had copies of the book to. We said we'd give one to the winning team. If they could have a copy of the book, um, and then unfortunately we went on to win. So so we were either going to give the book to ourselves, but we did eventually give a book to each team. But no, yeah, we won, and it was a lot of fun. But also the US team, I haven't come over to the US for the launch, but the US team have gone out for several pub quizzes, and they've taken the book with them. And I think one of them they came either second or third. I can't be sure. I can't remember. But I think they won shots. So I'm not sure what time they were back in at the office the next day. But yeah, so they've celebrated with pub quizzes as well. So it's both sides of the Atlantic have celebrated the launch of the Killer Question by going to pub quizzes. So that's so perfect.
I love that. So are they, what, in New York City doing that?
They are, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would be. They can do some really interesting things in a place with a population density that is so, I mean, in Phoenix, you can't really like put banners on the sides of buses. There's no subway, to whatever it is, and it would be much more difficult to do that. I noticed that for a few things, might have been Ruth Ware, who's from your same publisher. They actually gave away like 500 books to people sitting in some large open space in New York. So they could film everybody like reading the book. But I like the idea of going out and doing what, as you pointed out earlier, would really be bar quizzes, although there are pubs, but more or less going into bars and setting it
Mhm.
up. I think that's so great to get people out again, interacting personally, not on their screens, not, my husband and I met in a bridge tournament. We were playing against each other for a national championship. And you can now do that online.
Mhm.
But then, it's a completely different thing if you can play against a computer, but it's just totally different than competing against another person.
Yeah, yeah. I guess I never thought of it like that before. But yeah, you can do everything online now. There's so few things that can't be achieved online, and when you can do it from your home, the temptation to just do that is terrible. I mean, I don't go out anywhere near as much as I used to go out before the pandemic,
Right,
and that's purely because since over those years, so many more things moved online or moved onto TV that
right.
I almost don't have to. And that's a shame because I used to go out a lot.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've only been to the movie theater like once maybe
Mm.
since post-COVID. And when I discovered that if you were in the movie theater, you could call DoorDash to deliver food to your seat.
Oh, really?
I decided that that was now a different experience, but I mean, years ago, Marshall McLuhan wrote, the Canadian wrote a wonderful book called The Medium is the Message, in which he talked about a solipsis act, reading basically being a solipsis act, as opposed to viewing, like going to a theater or going to a movie. And it used to be that if you went to a movie, the whole audience was kind of, was in the same place. I mean,
Mm.
that's why you came, right?
Yeah.
And you settled in and you weren't on your phone, you weren't ordering food, you didn't bring, the baby, you didn't socialize with your friends while the movie was on. You were there as kind of a large body all focused
Mm.
on watching the film. And I think that it's very hard to achieve that anymore. Perhaps at a concert, perhaps at an opera, that kind of thing where you're focused on the stage. But people's manners or sense of community participation has been really eroded um, by the phone. We went out to dinner here not long ago, a couple of weeks ago, very high-end restaurant here in Scottsdale, full of people. I mean, no empty tables, quite loud. And the table right next to us, these two young women, very fashionably dressed, came in and sat down, and they pulled out their phones and they never exchanged a single word. I mean, not the entire time we were there. They were sitting there and they ordered something, but there was no conversation, no interaction. They were both completely engrossed in their screens. And I thought, why did they come?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe for the food, but I mean,
Yeah.
otherwise, the whole socialization of like going out to dinner with
Mm,
people where you have conversation and all the rest of it, there was
mm.
none of that.
Yeah, and it's a weird thing that my books are written down conversation, and that's what people are conversing with now. Even when, like you said, they're sitting at dinner with someone, they're actually talking to someone else online,
Right.
with or reading things written by someone else online. So yeah, just as you were talking, I was thinking, wow, that's almost like they're like reading like one of my books while in real life, they're doing it in real life, while life is passing them by. But I'm as guilty as that as anyone. And I go out with my partner, and sometimes I catch us both on our phones.
Aha.
Well, I know is
Well,
oh,
we have a rule that we can't do that. So,
do you?
yeah,
We're gonna have to have that rule. We're gonna
no,
have to do that.
we absolutely
Yeah.
do. And it's good for me to have to go down. Well, I shouldn't say I have to go down. It's my privilege to go down to the bookstore almost every night and have conversations with interesting people. Um, and and the phone is off.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm sitting there in real time having a real conversation with people,
Hmm.
explaining their stories or talking about whatever. Um, so maybe that's why I'm not particularly addicted to my phone, because I don't spend a lot of time on it. In fact, my husband gets somewhat impatient with me because, he's flitting around going from travel app to this or that or ordering something online. And I'm going, why don't you just go to the store and try on the pants? Why do you order like 7 pairs from Amazon? You could decide which one of them you like, I mean, it's almost as though we're operating in completely different universes.
Hmm.
I still prefer to go and and have the tactile shopping experience to see. Maybe it's because I don't really want to try on 7 pairs of things and then box up six and send them back. I don't know, but we're all different for sure. So the killer question obviously is doing well. Do you anticipate? Well, what do you anticipate next? I always like
Oh.
to sort of wind up with the idea that you're working on something else that we're just going to love.
Oh, well, you bet. I've just got my structural edits for my book for next year that we'll be talking about this time next year. I can't tell you anything about it at the moment because
Okay.
I've only just got the structural edit, and I think it's going to change quite a bit. So I can't say much about that. But I had a children's book published here in the UK.
I did. In fact,
I'm
I
going to have
imported it. I was able to get it from Gardner's that has a U.S. distribution center in
excellent.
Atlanta. Hmm.
A box full of murders, but
Yeah.
and I've the second box full of murders is out next June, and that I've just finished all the main edits for that. So that's called The Death at the Museum, and it's set at the Natural History Museum. So that's really the next book launch I've got. That's next June, and that's a lot of fun to write, as is writing for children generally.
And then, and you have an adult book. We don't have to know anything about it. What I really like to do is leave people with the idea that there'll be another Janice Hallett book in the
There
near
will.
future.
I can, yeah,
You know,
definitely. This time next year. Yeah.
Wonderful. It sounds exciting. One day, I hope, if we get past present circumstances, you will actually get to come to Scottsdale.
That would be amazing because after speaking to you for so long and having met you in London, I need to actually see the shop. I've never seen it. So yeah,
Well,
it would be
it would
wonderful.
surprise you that the actual bookstore is small. The building
Ah,
is
yeah.
large. So people think the bookstore is the store, but it's actually the building is the bookstore. And the
Yeah.
bookstore is just this sort of show-offy, theater part, and it does look very small, but it's not. But anyway, you'll be happy to know there's a nonstop flight from Heathrow to Phoenix.
Oh, excellent. How
That's
many
what I came
hours?
to see you on. Yeah, British Air has a wonderful
Okay.
schedule. Leaves London at 2 o'clock, gets here at 5, leaves
Okay.
here at 7:30 at night, gets back to London about noon.
So is
So
that an 8-hour flight? How long is the flight?
it's depends on which direction you're going. It's faster when going to London because the
Mhm.
wind is, moving in the right direction for you. Slower going from London back to Scottsdale, but a lot of it depends on the weather and,
Okay.
the inevitable delays at the airport. But, I mean, they're always saying, your flight's going to be whatever, but it depends, is the fueling finished? Did the caterer show up?
Hmm.
Was there a gate? Whatever.
Yeah.
But still, I think the reason I love it, it's the most user-friendly flight in terms of the time. If you
Oh.
if you get on it at 7:30 at night here
Mhm.
and you emerge at lunchtime in England, you don't have a horrible transition. If you leave England at 12 and you get here around dinner time, it's a long day, but you're not, it's not like you're suddenly arriving at 1 in the morning when your clock is all. So I think compared to other international flights, the British Air has worked out kind of the optimal human factor. What will make people feel the best when they deplane. And so I really like that. It makes up for any deficiencies at Heathrow. For Sky Harbor, which is a much smaller airport, but a very good one. So, Patrick, come and join us and see if we have any people who would like to comment or ask questions or whatever.
Let's see. Well, first of all, I wanted to
There it is. We can
Oh,
see
the
it.
wow.
Okay,
signed
Excellent.
side
copy.
by side. Look at
That
that.
is so
And they
beautiful.
also have our British copies have this cool little coaster.
Oh, a beer mat.
It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
has a
yeah.
pub beer mat in it.
Yeah.
Wow, I love
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Very
Well,
nice.
I know we don't have
Um,
many of the British left, so if you're watching this, you will do wisely to grab one while you can.
we had six when this program started, so we'll see what we have
All right.
now.
Oh,
Um, let's see. Not too many real questions. Stefania is tuned in. It's early for her. I
It
think it's
is.
probably like,
oh,
She lives in Tuscany, Janice, and most
oh,
of the
wow.
time when she's watching our programs, it's like 3 in the morning in Tuscany, and I always worry
Oh,
about her.
she wants to know how is your writing influenced by your passion for travel?
oh, that's a good question because I've not really set any of my novels anywhere other than the UK so far. So I haven't actually exercised my passion for travel yet, but hopefully I will. I am, I do have some ideas. Without saying too much, I do have some ideas that would take my my action overseas. And watch this space. Watch this space. Yeah, I would love to incorporate some of my experiences that I've had abroad. And yeah, I hope to do that in the future.
There was actually a couple of people are curious about your library there behind you. I
Oh,
see a
yep.
nice row of Penguin classics, it looks like.
Yep,
Um,
up there. Yep,
yeah,
there we go. The Black Spines. Yeah, they're Penguin Classics. All of these books, pretty much all of them that you can see, are from quite a long time ago. Those Penguin Classics are, classics in themselves now. They're mainly from my English degree because I've tidied all of them up. They've been tidy there for years. And if you'd seen my Zoom since lockdown in 2000, this would be pretty much be my background because they don't really change. But what you don't see is all the boxes and all the newer books elsewhere out of shot that are nowhere near as tidy as those. But because they were all from my degree, I can honestly say, absolutely honestly, hand on heart, I've read every single one of them that you can see,
was there any
hand on heart.
area that you kind of specialized in or that you had a particular interest in?
Yeah, Victorian novelists was
Uh,
I suppose I did my long essay on Thomas Hardy. So yeah, the Victorian novelists, the Brontes, Hardy, um, yeah, great. Far
was
from the Madding Crowd is one of my favourite novels.
I like Tess.
Yeah. Oh, and Tess as well. Yeah.
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 was Far from the Madding Crowd, was that the one with the Reddleman? Or was that the Return of the Native?
I think that's Return of the Native. Far from the
Yeah,
Madding Crowd is Bathsheba Everdeen and
gotcha.
Gabriel Oak. Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, any thoughts of TV adaptations or
Oh, I
film?
wish, I wish. They've been optioned by and large. Certainly the first three are under option still. None of them are anywhere near being made at the moment. I mean, I've written pilot scripts for them, but this process is so long and so involved and takes years. Um, keep your fingers crossed. So I really hope to see something on screen at some point. That would be absolutely magical.
Now, audiobooks are such a big part of, the American scene, book scene. Is it the same in the UK? And are you pleased with your audiobook versions?
Very, very, very pleased with the audiobook versions. They all have multiple casts. They're multiple voices are read because of the nature of the text. And although I don't listen to audiobooks myself, um, audiobook listeners do tell me that they are very, very good for these multi-voice productions. And yeah, a lot of people do like their audiobooks. They have them on in the car, they have them on while they're doing things, and that's amazing. It's another way to read and another way to consume literature. So although I don't actually listen to them myself, it's not the way I consume my books, I do love that that's another way for people to enjoy my work.
I've been very impressed at how, our programs are streamed. And I think we're something like 320,000 downloads of the audio tracks for these conversations, which are
Really?
posted on our website. Yeah.
Wow.
I think that's great that people can not only enjoy books, but of course, podcasts are a huge thing. So in a way, they're
Mhm.
kind of a podcast without a script. But I do think in a mobile society that the ability to listen, to take in stories and content is really valuable.
Yeah, and we're coming back to the phone thing. It's a more active way of participating in a work of literature to listen to it than to be reading your phone. So yeah.
That's true. Is that
I
it, Patrick?
think that's about it.
Wonderful. Well, Janice, it's
Yeah.
always a joy to talk to you.
Always, always.
Right, here we are, the killer question, both editions, which I think are fabulous. And maybe it will lead to something of a revival of the pub quiz. If you come see us, we'll have to construct a quiz night. It'll be great. A
Brilliant. That
whole
would be wonderful.
it would be, yeah. I really like that idea. I think, as a matter of fact, we're doing an authorless event for Richard Osman on Saturday morning, and there is a trivia question sheet that's been provided, which I haven't seen because I haven't had time to go look yet, which I'm assuming just relates to the books, the Thursday Murder Club and all. But
Yeah.
I like that idea that.
Excellent. Oh, wonderful. Well, good luck for that.
Thank you. It'll be a little quiz with a prize, right? So anyway, enjoy the rest of your day, people in the US, and have a good night's sleep if you're in the UK. And thank you all very much for